They said God is dead, like it was a funeral held in the middle of a thunderstorm, and nobody cried. Just a cold announcement, like a breaking news alert. God is dead. We killed him. But the strange thing is, even after the supposed death, the silence still aches. It rings in the back of the mind. It pulses in the gut of a restless world. Because when you say something is dead, there's supposed to be closure. But this wasn't a clean ending. It didn't feel like freedom. It felt like something sacred had been torn out, and nothing real was put back in its place. Nietzsche didn't just say God is dead. He said, we killed him. Not nature, not time, not erosion. We, humanity. But what kind of death leaves behind a longing this deep? Look around. Look at the quiet desperation in people's eyes, the stress behind the filtered smiles, the way the night feels heavier now, like the stars are watching, but don't speak anymore. We replaced the eternal with the temporary, and then wondered why we still feel empty. This isn't about religion. This is about hunger. A hunger for something real. Something beyond algorithms and bank accounts and endless distractions. Something that doesn't crumble when life hits you with pain, loss, betrayal. Something that doesn't vanish when your identity gets shaken. Nietzsche thought he was liberating us. But what happens when you tear down the cathedral and find the ground underneath hollow? What happens when the new gods, money, image, ego, offer no comfort in the dark? The modern world tells us, just be yourself. Just follow your truth. But what if you don't know who you are? What if your truth is soaked in trauma, confusion, and questions you can't answer? This is the echo we're left with after the so-called death of God. Not peace, not progress, not liberation, just noise. And underneath that noise, silence. A silence that doesn't soothe, but stings. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the death of God wasn't a declaration. Maybe it was a warning. Because when the sacred is removed, everything becomes transactional. When the divine is declared dead, all we're left with is the marketplace. Life becomes a series of trades. Time for money, attention for validation, bodies for likes. But deep down, something in us remembers, not as knowledge, as ache. An ache that haunts even the most confident atheist. Not a fear of punishment, not fear of hell, but fear of meaninglessness. You can't kill the question. Wherever you bury God, the question still grows like weeds in the cracks. Why am I here? What does this all mean? Is there something more than the grind, more than survival? These aren't religious questions. These are human questions, and no philosophy has successfully removed them. You can numb them. You can distract yourself. You can cover them with identity, career, pleasure, pride. But at 2 a.m., when the noise dies down, they return. Louder, closer, realer. So maybe God didn't die. Maybe we just lost the courage to face what he represented. The call to something higher, the weight of responsibility, the demand to live with depth, not just speed, the terrifying invitation to be known. Because a living God, even an unseen one, isn't easy to carry. But neither is the void that tries to replace him. This video isn't here to preach. It's not here to prove. It's here to look into that silence and ask, what if God was never dead? What if we just buried the questions too soon? What if we've been living in the echo and mistaking that for the end? So here we are. The echo is still ringing. God is dead. And what followed? A culture that traded its soul for speed. A society that learned how to move fast, but forgot why it was moving. A generation raised on pixels and algorithms, but starving for something real. We know how to scroll. We know how to swipe. but we don't know how to stay. Stay in a moment. Stay in pain. Stay in silence long enough to hear the whisper beneath all this noise. Nietzsche didn't just say, God is dead. He added, and we have killed him. That part gets skipped because it hurts. It puts the weight back on us. It wasn't just about losing belief in God. It was about replacing God with nothing. No meaning, no grounding. Just a gaping hole where something sacred used to be. And into that hole, we poured distractions, work, entertainment, status, screens. The hunger didn't go away. We just stopped naming it. We became clever instead of wise, loud instead of deep. We traded the ache for quick pleasures and called it progress. But deep down, everyone still feels it. That strange emptiness you can't quite explain. That ache at the end of a good night. That silence in the middle of success. That haunting feeling that even when you're winning, something's still missing. That's the wound Nietzsche left open. Not because he was wrong to name the crisis, but because he didn't heal it. He saw the problem, and then he told us, now you're on your own. But are we really? If God is dead, then why do we still build altars? Not with stone, but with attention. Followers, influence, ideologies. We are still worshipping. We just forgot what it means to worship. Now we bow to fame, money, image, pleasure, control. We bow without realizing we're on our knees. The tragedy isn't that we lost God. It's that we replaced God with nothing meaningful. We made ourselves the center of the universe, and then we wondered why it all feels so hollow. And here's the raw truth most won't say. When you kill God, you kill accountability to something higher, something beyond ego. Without that, we drift. We become the gods of our own stories, but we have no map. We crown ourselves kings of meaning, but the kingdom is empty. So we fill the silence with more noise, more goals, more self-improvement, more hustle. We read books, chase hacks, find gurus, but we don't slow down long enough to ask the deeper question, what am I really building? Who am I becoming? If God is dead, then what is left? Nature didn't give up on meaning. He believed we must now create it ourselves, not inherit it, not borrow it, but forge it. But how do you forge meaning in a culture allergic to stillness? How do you build something eternal in a world obsessed with the next thing? You start by looking at the void and refusing to run. That ache inside you. It's not a flaw, it's the start of something. It's not there to crush you, it's there to call you to something deeper. That hunger isn't weakness, it's a compass. Because when you stare into the void long enough, you have two choices. Become the void or become the flame. The void is easy. You just let the world numb you. You float, you scroll, you pretend nothing matters. But the flame, that takes everything. It burns away illusion. It demands truth. It asks for your full presence. The flame is uncomfortable, but it's alive. And that's the new starting point. Not believing in an old God handed down through tradition, but believing that life itself still calls for something sacred, that your life still holds weight, that your choices still echo. You don't have to go back to religion, but you do have to go forward into meaning. You don't need to kneel in a temple, but you do need to stop kneeling to emptiness, the void or the flame. You don't get to avoid that choice, because if you don't choose, the void chooses you. And it always chooses silence, the kind that isn't peaceful, but hollow. So here's the question. What have you been giving your soul to lately? And is it worthy? We'll keep going. We're just getting started. Pursue twos. We've been sold a dream, that with time, life gets better, that the arc of history bends toward progress. that each new invention, each new app, each new system will bring us closer to peace, to purpose, to something that finally feels whole. But what if that dream is broken? What if what we call progress is just a faster treadmill with prettier views? What if, for all the things we've gained, we've lost the only thing that ever mattered? A sense of soul. Think about it. We have more comfort, more connection, more convenience than any generation in human history. And yet, anxiety is through the roof. Depression is everywhere. Suicide, addiction, spiritual burnout, they're not going away. In fact, they're growing. Because you can't out-tech a soul wound. You can't solve an existential crisis with noise, updates, or a new dopamine hit. We call this civilization, but something in us knows better. Something in us is quietly screaming, "This isn't it." Nietzsche was right about one thing. The death of God wasn't just a loss of belief. It was a tearing of the root. We were cut loose from the eternal. The old compass shattered, and now we float, proud, but directionless. We replaced the sacred with systems. We traded awe for algorithms. We cut the sky in half, and then wondered why our prayers echo back so quiet. And still, we keep going. Like speed will save us. Like momentum can replace meaning. But deep down, we know. We're starving. Not for food, not for likes, for something older, something deeper, a connection to what is beyond all this. Not religious dogma, not rules, but soul. Call it what you want. Spirit, essence, the mystery, the hum beneath reality, the spark behind your eyes. But if you don't feed it, you will suffer. Because the soul doesn't die when ignored. It haunts. It lingers in quiet moments. It stirs when you least expect it. It's that sudden ache when you see a sunset. That lump in your throat when someone forgives you. That silence inside you when you realize all your success still didn't fix the hole. Nietzsche said, "We have killed God." But he didn't say the soul died with him. The soul waits. But here's the twist. In a world without God, feeding your soul becomes your responsibility. Not society's, not your parents', not some priests or gurus. Yours. And that terrifies us. Because it means no more blaming. No more hiding behind systems or stories. It means looking in the mirror and asking, what am I really doing with this life? Am I building something eternal? Or am I just playing dress up in the ruins of meaning? Most people don't want that question. They want distractions. They want the next thing. Because asking the real question means facing the void inside. And that void is loud. But here's the good news. It's not empty. That void is the call. The same call that's been whispered since time began. It says, you are not a machine. You are not just a body. You are more. And no matter how dead God seems, that call keeps speaking. So maybe the real problem isn't that God is dead. Maybe the real tragedy is that we stopped listening. And maybe that's what we fix next. So what do you do when the silence gets loud? When the void starts whispering doubts into your ear, telling you none of this matters, that you're just a blip, a body, a bundle of instincts, chasing comfort until it all fades to black. You stop, not out of surrender, but to listen. Because beneath that silence, there's something else. A pulse, a yearning, a question that keeps returning no matter how much you try to bury it. Is this all there is? It's the question you hear when the party's over, when the screen goes black, when you finally have the thing you thought would fix it, and it doesn't. And that question is sacred. It's the ember that keeps meaning alive. Nietzsche said, we killed God, but he missed something. We didn't kill the longing for God. We buried the word, maybe. We abandoned the rituals, but the ache, the hunger, still here, still burning. It's not about religion. It's about the parts of you that refuse to be satisfied with just the material. It's about the tears that rise when you're alone and honest. The moments when beauty punches through your defenses and leaves you breathless. The way we reach, always reach, for something more. That ache is a signal, and we've been misreading it. We thought it meant we were broken, that something's wrong with us, that we're too sensitive, too emotional, too lost. But maybe we're not broken. Maybe we're just unfinished. And the ache is a reminder of that. Not a flaw, a doorway. See, if you numb that ache, you also numb the part of you that's capable of awe, of reverence, of stillness that isn't empty but full. We don't talk about reverence anymore. It's not trending, doesn't boost engagement, but it's the posture your soul takes when it meets something deeper. It's not submission, it's not fear, it's recognition that life is bigger than your plans. That meaning can't be manufactured, it has to be encountered. And yes, the world's loud, too loud. It teaches you to chase attention instead of intention, to build a brand instead of a being. But beneath the noise, something is still calling, the ancient ache. You felt it in the way your chest tightens at a perfect sunrise, in the way you cry and don't know why, in the way some music doesn't just move you, it remembers you. That's not an algorithm. That's not neurons firing randomly. That's something older than language. You can drown it out. You can keep pretending your feed is your truth. You can build your whole identity from pixels and applause. But the ache will wait and whisper and keep asking, is this all there is? And if you're brave enough to say no, if you're brave enough to believe the ache isn't a problem but a path, then everything changes. You stop chasing the next thing. You start searching for the real thing. And that's where the path begins. Not with certainty, but with longing. Not with doctrine, but with hunger. Not with proof, but with presence. The longing isn't weakness. It's the most honest part of you. So don't rush to silence it. Let it speak. Let it lead. Because maybe the longing isn't proof God is dead. Maybe it's proof something holy is still very much alive. And maybe it's been waiting for you to notice. Let's get real. You're tired. Not just physically, soul tired. The kind of tired that sleep doesn't fix. The kind that creeps in when you're always chasing, always doing, always performing. You think if you slow down, everything will fall apart. That if you stop, the silence will swallow you. So you keep moving, keep scrolling, keep pretending. But here's the thing. Stillness isn't your enemy. It's your teacher. The real war isn't out there. It's in here. You don't need more noise. You don't need more apps, more gurus, more productivity hacks. You need stillness. Not the passive kind, not laziness. I'm talking about the kind of stillness that forces you to face yourself. The kind that peels back your masks and asks, who are you when no one's watching? That's why people are afraid of it. Because stillness is a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. When Nietzsche declared God is dead, what followed wasn't just an intellectual shift. It was a spiritual panic. We filled the sacred space with movement, momentum, and modernity. But no amount of progress will quiet a soul that's never been heard. We became a people terrified of quiet. Because in the quiet, we meet our hunger. And in that hunger, we meet the truth that beneath all our chasing is a child who still longs to be held by something real. You can call it meaning, call it soul, call it source. You don't have to name it the way others do, but you have to stop pretending you don't need it. Because even atheists pray, not with folded hands, but with aching hearts, with deep breathless moments when they stare at the stars or bury their face in their hands and whisper, "Please." That's a prayer, and it counts. You don't need to believe in a sky god to feel the presence of something greater. You just need to stop running, because the thing you keep chasing, it's been trying to find you too. And it doesn't speak through noise, it speaks through stillness. The modern world keeps you distracted because a distracted soul is easier to control, easier to sell to, easier to numb. But a soul that slows down, that listens, that remembers, that soul is dangerous. Because it starts asking questions that can't be answered by marketing campaigns. It starts seeking meaning that doesn't fit in a shopping cart or a status update. It starts remembering that before the noise, before the fear, there was something sacred. So if you're tired of running, stop. Be still. Not because it's easy, because it's necessary. Sit in the quiet. Let the ache speak. Let the longing rise. Let the questions echo. And don't rush to fix it. Just be there. Honest, present, unfiltered. Because if God isn't dead, that's where you'll find him. Not in the noise, but in the stillness you keep running from. Pursues. Let's talk about the part no one wants to admit. The collapse. That internal crumbling that doesn't make the news but wrecks your world. The moment when the old answers don't work anymore. When the roles you played don't fit. When life hits so hard, you forget who you are. That's the earthquake. And if you've felt it, you know, it doesn't come with warning signs. It shows up like a thief in the night. Maybe it's a loss, a betrayal, a failure that broke something in you. Maybe it's nothing dramatic, just a slow, creeping emptiness that spread like fog. Nietzsche said, "God is dead, and we killed him." But what happens after the funeral? What happens when the meaning that held your life together falls apart? That's the real crisis. Not just the death of belief, but the death of direction. People think the opposite of belief is atheism. It's not. The opposite of belief is numbness. That cold, detached drift through days. That sense of disconnection that eats from the inside out. And here's the wild part. Sometimes that earthquake is mercy in disguise. Because collapse clears the ground. It burns down the illusions you built to survive. And in that ash, you get a chance to build something real. Not handed to you, not downloaded from someone else's faith. Yours, rooted, earned, true. We're taught to fear the collapse, to hide our breakdowns, to act like we've got it all figured out. But what if the fall is sacred? What if losing your way is part of finding a better one? This isn't about becoming religious. It's about becoming honest. About realizing that pretending is a prison. That doubt isn't weakness, it's the door to depth. That the questions you're scared to ask might be the only ones worth answering. God isn't found in the shallow certainty of slogans. God, or whatever word you choose, is found in the trembling, in the silence after your soul hits the floor, in the breath you take when you're still here, even though everything fell apart. If you're in that space, this is for you. Not the version of you that performs, the one behind your eyes, raw and real. You're not broken, you're breaking open. And there's a difference. One leads to shame, the other leads to freedom. You don't have to rush to rebuild. You don't need a 5-step recovery plan. You just need to stop pretending you're okay when you're not. Collapse isn't failure. It's the floor of something deeper. Let the pieces fall. Let the quake happen. Because only what's false will break. And what's true in you, that sacred core, It won't just survive, it will rise. Let's go even deeper. What do you reach for when you're falling apart? Be honest. Most people don't reach for truth. They reach for escape, for distractions dressed as saviors. Some people run to alcohol, some to Netflix, some to religion. Not for connection, but for anesthesia. A way to shut off the ache, not heal it. This isn't an attack on belief. This is a call out on avoidance. Because anything, even good things, can become chains if you're using them to run from yourself. If you're using them to silence the questions you're too scared to sit with. Nietzsche saw this clearly. He saw how people used religion not to awaken, but to sedate. Not to rise, but to retreat. And in that sense, he was right to call it out. But here's where he got it wrong. Just because some people use God as a sedative doesn't mean God isn't real. Just because some institutions became corrupt doesn't mean meaning itself is dead. You don't throw out the sky because some built towers that blocked the light. What Nietzsche missed, and what we keep missing, is that the real problem isn't belief. It's false saviors, the things we turn to instead of transformation, the crutches that become cages. It's not the act of seeking help. It's the refusal to face the pain directly. And our world is full of polished escapes, self-help influencers selling identity, religion selling certainty, technology selling distraction. But none of them can carry you through the real fire. They can only numb you to it. And here's the trap. The more you rely on false saviors, the harder it gets to hear your own soul. You start thinking that safety is the same as peace. That comfort is the same as healing. That quiet is the same as wholeness. But deep down, something still hurts. And no savior, false or otherwise, can save you from the truth. You have to walk through it. There is no shortcut to real freedom. No belief system that exempts you from doing the work. No philosophy that can grow your soul for you. If God is real, not the caricature, not the vending machine in the sky, but the deep, grounding source of all that is, then He won't rescue you from your journey. He'll meet you in it. And that's the paradox. The divine doesn't pamper. It provokes. It doesn't coddle. It calls. It doesn't offer easy exits. It offers deeper entry. So the next time you're tempted to reach for something to take the edge off, pause. Ask yourself, is this healing me or hiding me? Is this helping me grow or keeping me stuck? Because you can't be free while worshipping your distractions. And you can't be whole while pretending you're not hurting. Let it burn. Let the fake gods fall. Let the false saviors be exposed. Because only then can you meet whatever's real. And that's where your path begins. So here you are, in the ashes, after the collapse, after the distractions failed, after the false saviors were exposed. Now what? Most people try to rebuild the same life that broke them. Same routines, same masks, same empty gods, because even suffering feels safer than the unknown. But if you've made it this far, it means something in you wants more. Not more stuff, not more validation, more real, more soul, more truth. And that want? That's the beginning of holy rebellion. Holy rebellion isn't about noise. It's not shaking fists or making statements. It's quieter, deeper. It's the rebellion of choosing awareness in a world addicted to numbness, of choosing purpose when everything around you screams, just get by. It's sacred disobedience, disobedience to the system that told you success is money, disobedience to the culture that told you silence is strength, disobedience to the lie that your value is something you earn. It's the moment you say, I refuse to sleepwalk through this. I refuse to settle. I refuse to betray my own soul just to fit in. That's holy. And yes, it will cost you. You'll lose comfort. You'll lose approval. You might even lose people who liked the quieter, safer version of you. But what you gain is far greater. You gain your voice. You gain your depth. You gain your life. See, rebellion has been hijacked by ego. We think it means proving something to the world, but the real rebellion isn't external. It's internal. It's the choice to burn the script and stop playing the role you never wrote. It's walking away from the shallows and diving into mystery, into presence, into the kind of honesty that makes people uncomfortable because it's so real. Nietzsche thought that without God, we would create new values, new meanings. But look around. We replaced cathedrals with screens, silence with scroll, wonder with algorithms, and people are still starving inside. So no, the answer isn't just inventing meaning, it's remembering it, recovering what we buried. That sense of sacredness, that sense that life is not just data and deadlines, but something alive, demanding, devastating, beautiful. Holy rebellion is saying yes to that. Not to religion, not to dogma, but to the fire, to the ache, to the whisper that says, there is more. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just have to stop pretending you're okay with shallow answers. This isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming real. Because once you say no to what's false, you start to hear what's true. And that's where transformation begins. There's something the world doesn't want you to know, not because it's hidden, but because it's dangerous to systems, to structures, to the way things are. And it's this: you already have what you're looking for, not outside, not in someone else's approval. Inside, you have a fire, but fire by nature is disruptive. It doesn't politely ask for space. It consumes, it purifies, and that's exactly why so many of us are taught to put it out. Be agreeable, be safe, be normal. Translation: be small. Nietzsche knew we were being tamed, turned into obedient shadows of what we could be. He called it the herd instinct, the drive to belong so badly that we kill our own uniqueness just to not be alone. And he hated it. But here's where we take a different road. Nietzsche thought we had to kill God to unleash ourselves. But what if the fire inside is God? Not the God of dogma, the God of becoming, the flame that pushes you to grow, to stretch, to question, to suffer with purpose, and rise with meaning. That's not weakness, that's divinity, living in you. The world will try to shame you for your fire. It will call you too much, too intense, too sensitive, too deep, because it's afraid, because your fire threatens its numbness. And if you let it, the world will teach you to extinguish yourself, to trade your essence for acceptance. Don't. You weren't made to live half-lit. You weren't born to conform. You were born to burn, to carry light into places too used to dark, to speak what others swallow, to feel what others fear. The fire in you doesn't need permission. It needs courage. And yes, fire burns. You'll lose things. You'll lose people. But what you gain is you. You won't need to chase worth. You'll remember it. You won't need to find meaning. You'll ignite it. Because this isn't about becoming something else. It's about becoming what you already are, underneath the ashes of doubt and fear and smallness. So light the match. Fan the flame. Let the fire speak. Let it lead. Because when you burn with truth, with purpose, with soul, that's when the world changes. And that's when you finally feel alive. There's something strange about pain. Everyone tries to avoid it, outrun it, numb it, But the more you run, the more it follows. The more you hide it, the heavier it gets. What if pain isn't the enemy? What if it's a message, a sacred burden? See, we're taught that life should feel good, that happiness is the goal, that struggle is a mistake, a detour, a glitch in the system. But what if struggle is the system? Not as punishment, but as preparation. The world Nietzsche imagined after the death of God was one where we would invent new meanings, new values. But without something higher to aim toward, most people didn't rise. They drifted. They didn't create. They escaped into noise, into numbness, into pretending they were okay. The result? An empty kind of freedom, a shallow kind of strength. Because when nothing is sacred, nothing is worth suffering for. But when something is sacred, suffering becomes meaningful. It becomes a passage, a birth canal for who you could become. This is the sacred burden, to carry pain with purpose, to walk through the fire with open eyes, to not just survive the darkness, but learn from it, build with it, create because of it. We all carry something, a wound, a fear, a regret, and we all want someone to take it away, to make it lighter. But the deeper truth is that we are not meant to be weightless. We are meant to grow strong enough to carry what is ours with grace. The sacred burden transforms when we stop resisting it and start listening to it. What is your pain trying to tell you? What is the lesson inside the wound? Nietzsche said, "To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering." But even he missed something. We don't just survive suffering. We can become through it. We can alchemize it, not just tolerate it, transcend it. And that kind of becoming doesn't come from a textbook. It doesn't come from watching others. It comes from walking your own path, falling, failing, getting back up. You want real transformation? Then stop trying to avoid the weight. Pick it up. Stop praying for it to go away. Ask what it's here to teach. Because the pain you carry isn't proof that God is dead. It's proof that your soul is alive. You feel because you care. You break because you matter. You carry because there is something in you worth protecting, worth growing, worth rising for. And when you carry your sacred burden long enough, something shifts. It doesn't get lighter, you get stronger, not in spite of your suffering, because of it. This is what the modern world has forgotten. That strength isn't built in comfort, it's forged in fire. So stop apologizing for the weight you carry. Own it. It's not your weakness, it's your invitation to transform, to deepen, to rise. There is a kind of truth that doesn't shout, it doesn't post, it doesn't trend, it doesn't win arguments. It lives in silence. Call it intuition, call it conscience, call it soul. It's that quiet knowing that stirs when the world gets loud. The feeling that something is missing, even when you have everything. The whisper that asks, is this all there is? Nietzsche wanted us to become creators of meaning, authors of our own values. But most of us were never taught how to listen to that inner voice. We were taught to silence it, to follow the script, to survive, not awaken. But inside you, there's a deeper compass, something ancient, something untouched by the chaos outside. It doesn't speak in commands, it speaks in feeling. When you betray yourself, it aches. When you move toward truth, it warms. The death of God left a silence. But in that silence, there is something sacred, a space where you can finally hear yourself again. Not the ego, not the mask, but the part of you that remembers. Remembers that you're more than a number, more than a role. That you have dignity no one can take. That you don't need to invent worth. You need to uncover it. This silent knowing is what makes us restless in comfort. It's why success without meaning feels hollow. It's why distraction never satisfies. It keeps calling, not because it wants to punish you, but because it wants you back. This isn't religion. This isn't dogma. This is about inner resonance. That gut-deep sense that there is something more and that it lives in you. You don't have to prove it. You just have to pause long enough to feel it, to let the noise settle, to hear the thing that never left. Because underneath all the fear, underneath the doubt and the performance, there is a silent knowing that says, you are not lost. You are not alone. And you don't have to become anything except real. Let that be enough. Let that be where the new life begins. If God is dead, why do we still hunger? Not for food, but for truth, for meaning, for something unshakable. Nietzsche pronounced the death of God as a warning, not a celebration. He saw what was coming, a world unanchored, drifting. But the question no one really asks is, what died, exactly? Was it the old image of God, the bearded judge in the sky? Was it the authority of religion? Or was it the thread that once tied us to something beyond ourselves? Because even now, when we strip away all the noise, the hunger remains. A silent ache for something eternal, something deeper than survival, something that tells us we matter. People try to fill that gap with everything: money, power, validation, endless entertainment. But the hunger doesn't go away. Why? Because it was never about having more. It was about being more. The real death wasn't God. It was the death of connection, to mystery, to meaning, to the part of us that kneels, not out of weakness, but out of awe. There is a reason children ask big questions before they learn to fake certainty. There's a reason the most painful moments make people pray, even if they don't know who they're praying to. Nietzsche wasn't wrong to criticize blind faith, but he was wrong to think the hunger could be erased. It's built into us. The question isn't whether God exists the way we were taught. The question is whether life without reverence, without stillness, without sacredness can ever satisfy a human soul. So many walk around numb, calling it freedom. But freedom without meaning is just disconnection with better marketing. We think we want certainty, but what we really want is significance. To know that our life matters. To know that love is not an accident. To know that when we suffer, it's not for nothing. This is the living question, not one that demands answers, but one that demands presence. We don't need to go back to superstition. We need to go forward with sincerity, to ask again, to open again, to listen for what never died. Because the real tragedy isn't that God is dead, it's that we stopped looking. And the real transformation begins when we dare to ask again, with open hands and a quiet heart. What if there is more? There's something beneath the noise, beneath the headlines, the scroll, the spin, a rhythm, a pulse, something that doesn't change no matter how wild the surface becomes. Most people never touch it, because chaos is addictive. Distraction is easier than depth. Nietzsche said we killed God with our own hands, replaced the sacred with speed, meaning with metrics, wonder with algorithms. But that deep rhythm, it's still there, still beating, like a drum in the dark, like a memory we can't forget, but also don't fully understand. It's the sound of something eternal that refuses to die, just because we stopped believing. We keep trying to replace the sacred with noise that pretends to be knowledge, with power that pretends to be truth, with progress that forgets the soul. But listen, All that speed, all that consumption, it doesn't quiet the hunger. It just hides it for a while. And when you're alone, late at night, and everything slows down, you can still hear it. That question that won't die. That longing that won't shut up. Call it God. Call it mystery. Call it source. It doesn't need a label to be real. It just needs your attention. The world says, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist. But the heartbeat beneath the chaos laughs at that. Because it existed before you measured time, before you drew lines, before you needed proof. It existed when you were a child and sat in silence under the sky, when you cried and no one saw, and something unseen still held you. It existed the day you loved someone and didn't know why. It exists still, not in books, not in arguments, but in presence. Maybe the death Nietzsche talked about wasn't the death of God, but the death of our ability to be still, to be humble, to listen. The divine doesn't scream, it whispers. It's not in the spectacle, it's in the pause between your thoughts. It's in the breath you forgot to notice. It's in the ache you don't have words for. This part of you, the one that still listens, still aches, still wonders, that part isn't dead. It's just waiting. Waiting for you to remember. Not a doctrine, not a rule book, just the rhythm, just the heartbeat, just the sacred beneath the noise. It never left. We did. But we can return. Not with belief, but with presence. Not with dogma, but with awe. And when we do, we don't find the past. We find the part of the future that still has soul. So pause and listen. It's still beating. So are you. There's a moment that comes to everyone. A quiet one. Not dramatic, not cinematic. It comes between breaths, between days, in those strange pauses when life lets you feel how fragile it all is. And in that moment, the question whispers, if everything ends, what's the point? That's the real question behind God is dead. If there's no eternal, then is anything worth it? See, Nietzsche didn't just kill God. He killed the thread that once pulled people through pain, love, sacrifice, mystery. He pulled it to see what would remain. And what remains, if we're honest, is confusion in the face of infinity. We distract ourselves to avoid that moment. We chase novelty, noise, and numbness just to escape the silence. Because in silence, the questions get louder. And without something higher, something bigger, there's no answer big enough. You can build an empire, go viral, make millions. Every achievement feels like dust when the silence hits. Because the soul doesn't feed on success. It feeds on meaning. The modern world gave us comfort, but it stole our depth. It gave us choices, but stripped our purpose. It gave us freedom, but forgot to say freedom needs a direction. What do you aim at when you believe in nothing? That's the danger of a dead God. Not that we turn evil, but that we turn hollow, numb, rootless, silently aching for something we no longer have the courage to seek. But here's the truth. The ache is proof. The emptiness is not a verdict. It's an invitation. Because even in this world, where we act like everything is random, people still cry at weddings, at funerals, in the presence of great beauty. Why? Because something inside us knows there is more than pixels, more than algorithms, more than self-interest. We are moved by love, by sacrifice, by stories where someone lays down their life for someone else. And that doesn't come from evolution alone. That's a fingerprint. Call it God, call it mystery, call it soul, but don't call it dead. The fragile light still flickers in us, even if buried, even if denied, even if forgotten. And maybe that's the miracle, That even when we try to kill meaning, it rises. That even when we forget God, the ache remains. Not to torment us, but to wake us. Because maybe God isn't a sky figure, or an old book, or a church bell. Maybe God is the whisper behind your longing, the fire that refuses to go out, the voice that keeps saying, in your quietest moments, there is more, and you are not alone. If God is dead, then who hears us in the dark? Who walks with us when the night gets long and the silence is too loud to bear? The old stories say there is something greater, something that doesn't flinch at suffering, something that calls us not to escape life, but to engage with it, deeper than before. Nietzsche wanted us to become strong, without needing heaven, to build our own values, our own truth. But strength without roots is just pride with no ground. So what if the real power isn't becoming gods ourselves, but becoming fully human? Not avoiding the struggle, but forging strength through it. Real strength doesn't come from domination. It comes from perseverance. From holding steady when the world shakes. From showing up when no one claps. From forgiving when you could hate. And creating when it would be easier to destroy. We keep looking for heroes, but the truth is, the strength we need isn't in a savior above the clouds. It's in the fire we refuse to let die. In the decisions we make when no one is watching. In the truth we speak even when our voice trembles. If God is dead, then you have a choice. Let the world harden you into something cold and closed, or let the pain shape you into something open, strong, and real. We forget this, that even without religion, we still carry temples in our hearts, places of sacred silence where we confront what we are becoming. You don't need permission to transform. You don't need perfect faith to take the first step. You just need to decide that strength is worth building, that you won't let the fire go out inside you, no matter how long the night. Maybe God isn't a being out there. Maybe God is the light you keep alive when everything tries to put it out. And maybe, just maybe, that light is enough to begin again. When Nietzsche said, God is dead, he didn't just leave behind a silence. He left behind a weight, a terrible, invisible weight. Because when you remove the highest authority, what you get isn't automatic freedom. What you get is responsibility. That's the part most people miss. When there's no one left to answer to, no one left to obey, then there's no one left to blame either. You become the judge, the creator, the redeemer, the one who has to choose what matters and live with it. And that kind of freedom, it's heavy. It's not the freedom of doing whatever you want. It's the freedom of building meaning from the ground up with your bare hands, even while they're shaking. When God dies in a culture, some celebrate like chains have been broken. But soon they realize those chains were also a compass, a guide, a center. And without that center, every decision becomes a guess. Every desire becomes a god. The marketplace replaces the sanctuary. Followers replace worshippers. Addiction replaces devotion. And anxiety becomes the new prayer. We scroll instead of seek. We consume instead of contemplate. We chase dopamine instead of destiny. And in all this noise, freedom turns into numbness. Choice turns into confusion. And the self becomes a flickering signal, barely held together by impulse and distraction. This isn't what real freedom feels like. Real freedom isn't being unbound. It's knowing where to stand when everything is pulling you in different directions. It's having roots. It's saying no when everything screams yes. It's finding the still point inside the storm and building your life around it. So maybe Nietzsche was right in what he saw, but wrong in what he expected. He thought we'd rise as gods, creators of our own values, but most people just fell, not because they were weak, but because they were lied to, told that meaning would appear if we just removed the old, told that freedom would be enough, but meaning isn't found in a vacuum. It has to be made, and freedom by itself is just the space. The question is, what will you build in it? You can build a life that honors what came before without being enslaved by it. You can create meaning without pretending you're the first to ever suffer. You can live free, not by rejecting all boundaries, but by choosing the ones that hold you together. So no, God may not be the old man in the sky, but that doesn't mean there is no center, no truth, no ground. It just means you have to find it, and then live like it matters. Because the only thing heavier than freedom is the regret of never using it. That weight, it's yours now. Carry it well. We didn't just forget God. We forgot what it means to be human. In chasing progress, we lost presence. In building faster, we broke deeper. In trying to conquer the world, we forgot how to sit still within ourselves. Nietzsche warned us, once you kill God, you also kill all the shadows that came with him. But we never stopped to ask, what if some shadows were sacred? What if not everything that weighs heavy is meant to be thrown away? In the silence that came after God is dead, something else began to die too: remembrance. We stopped remembering who we are beyond flesh and name. We stopped remembering the depth in stillness, the wisdom in old stories, the strange comfort in knowing we come from something greater than ourselves. Now, everything must be new, exciting, optimized. But our souls don't speak in updates. They speak in echoes. They speak in the language of memory. Not nostalgia for the past, but reverence for the eternal. Because if we never remember, we forget to ask why we're even here. We forget the weight of love, the cost of sacrifice, the holiness of struggle. And when you forget those things, you don't become free, you become lost. This world sells forgetting as liberation. It tells you to abandon guilt, shame, faith, fear. But it never tells you what to replace them with. It leaves you floating in a freedom without direction, free from the past, but also free from meaning. But real freedom doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from remembering rightly, from carrying the weight with clarity, from honoring what mattered. We don't need to go back to blind obedience, but we do need to return to sacred memory, to what kept us human in the first place: awe, silence, wonder, the willingness to admit we don't have it all figured out. That maybe the point was never control. Maybe it was reverence. Maybe it was responsibility. Maybe it was love. And love, real love, always remembers. Not perfectly, but faithfully. Not to chain you to the past, but to ground you in something deeper than the noise. So no, we won't go back to superstition, but we will go back to remembering. Not because we're afraid of forgetting, but because the soul depends on it. Because when you remember rightly, every step forward becomes sacred. Not just useful, not just productive, but holy. And that might just be the beginning of real change. If God is dead, what rises in his place? Because something always does. When meaning collapses, something else moves into the void. Distraction, addiction, cynicism, control. When the soul has no ground to stand on, it gets sold to whatever numbs the ache fastest. But here's the hard truth. Numbing isn't healing. Controlling isn't living. And distraction is just slow, spiritual death with good Wi-Fi. We talk about resurrection like it's a fantasy, a myth for children or the weak. But what if it's the most human thing we do? What if every time you fall apart and choose to rebuild, every time you face what you fear and rise anyway, you're resurrecting something sacred inside you? This isn't about religion. It's about restoration, of wonder, of depth, of courage. A soul doesn't die from pain. It dies from abandonment, from going too long without being seen, without being heard, without being allowed to matter. We've built lives that look good from the outside, but are hollow on the inside. Endless scrolling, endless striving, endless pretending we're fine while the most important parts of us starve. You want resurrection? Stop outsourcing your worth. Stop thinking someone else will come fix it. Start by returning to yourself. Sit with the ache. Let it speak. Then choose to rise anyway. That's resurrection. We don't need more empty inspiration. We need the courage to feel again, to look each other in the eyes and say, yeah, I'm hurting too, but I'm not done yet. To resurrect the soul is to remember that your story didn't end where the pain began. It just paused, waiting for the part where you choose to come alive again. Nietzsche saw the death of God as the death of illusion. But the soul was never an illusion. It's the most real thing you have. So what rises in place of a dead God? Whatever you dare to live for. Raise something real. Raise something honest. Raise the soul that never truly died, just got buried under noise. You want resurrection? Then become the fire. Not the one that burns things down, the one that makes cold hearts warm again. Let the soul rise, not in theory, in your breath, in your choices, in how you show up when no one is clapping. That's resurrection, and it's yours to choose. If God is dead, why does silence still speak? Not the kind of silence that comes from nothingness, but the kind that hums beneath the chaos, the kind that exists between heartbeats, between thoughts, between the lines of every desperate cry for meaning. Even when the world is shouting, something in us still listens, and what we hear in that silence is not absence, it's invitation. Nietzsche mistook the silence of God for abandonment. But maybe the silence is how the divine whispers to those who are finally ready to hear. Because what if God was never loud? What if presence was never meant to compete with noise, but to outlast it? There are truths too deep for language, experiences too real for words, and sacredness that doesn't need to be proven to be lived. The death of God, as Nietzsche saw it, was a reflection of a culture too busy to feel, too fragmented to hear, too addicted to control, to trust mystery. But here's the paradox. In killing God, we made everything else louder. Opinions, brands, distractions, debates. And yet, under all that volume, something still aches, something still calls. That's not death. That's the sound of a soul that refuses to be silenced. And if you pause long enough, if you turn down the world's volume, you'll find it was never God who left. It was us, tuning out the frequencies that make us human. Call it God. Call it spirit. Call it the light behind your eyes. The name doesn't matter. The presence does. What matters is that we remember what it feels like to be fully alive. Not just functioning, not just achieving, but being. What matters is that we reclaim our inner ear, the one that hears meaning in the silence, that feels truth in the stillness. Because when we stop running, when we stop distracting, when we stop numbing, we begin to hear again. Not answers, but direction. Not certainty, but presence. Not dogma, but the living pulse of something more. Nietzsche gave us a warning dressed as a prophecy. He saw a world unraveling from its spiritual core. But he didn't see what would rise after the collapse. He didn't see the quiet revolution of those waking up. those feeling again, those daring to live as if the sacred never left. That revolution doesn't need churches or rituals. It just needs people who choose to listen beyond the noise and live from what they hear. Because maybe God never died. Maybe we just stopped listening. If God is dead, then what do we live for? That question has echoed through generations. Some answered with rebellion, some with despair, some with silence. But there are those who answer with becoming, not believing in the old gods, not retreating into myths, but walking forward with open eyes and a full heart. To become who you are is not a slogan, it's a summons, a lifelong rebellion against numbness, against imitation, against the smallness the world tries to sell you. Because here's the truth: you are not here by accident, and you are not a machine. You are not just a consumer of distractions or a cog in someone else's vision. You are a being of depth, born with the capacity to love, to weep, to create, to stand in awe of existence and ask, why am I here? That question matters, not because it has one answer, but because it refuses to go away. It grows with you. It deepens as you break and rebuild. Become who you are is not about self-expression. It's about self-discovery. It asks you to stop running, to stop hiding behind roles, routines, masks. It asks you to slow down and meet yourself beneath the noise. Who are you when you're not performing? Who are you when no one is watching? What remains when the surface cracks? You are the question and the answer, the seeker and the fire. You are the one who has suffered and the one who still dares to hope. That's not small, that's sacred. Nietzsche saw a world collapsing under the weight of its own lies. He stripped away illusion, and in the rubble, he offered this fierce challenge. Live as if your life is your answer. Live as if meaning is something you build, not inherit. Live so honestly that you leave nothing wasted. Not because it's easy, not because there's a prize, but because your soul demands it. This is not about going back to a god from the past. It's about facing the mystery that never left. It's about standing in the space where certainty fails and choosing to live anyway, to love anyway, to hope anyway. Because when you live like that, when you live from your center, you don't need to be told what God is. You carry it. In your breath, in your choices, in your courage. The death of God was never the end. It was a beginning, not of despair, but of daring. So now it's your turn to become who you are, to live with your whole being, to burn away the false and walk into the real, not with perfect faith, but with honest fire. This is not the end of belief. It's the beginning of becoming, and it is holy. Thank you for walking this road, not just through these words, but through your own unfolding. Stay awake, stay brave, and don't forget, what you seek is not far away. It's already within you. Now, become it.